Dang.
Welcome everybody to a mid-afternoon version of the CrabDribbles Hangout. Huge basketball day. We got the playoffs coming up later tonight, but all the news is what happened a brief half hour, maybe an hour ago, when Adam Silver banned Donald Sterling from the league for life. The central findings of the investigation are that the man whose voice is on the recording is Mr. Sterling, and that the hateful feelings are those of Sterling. The views expressed are deeply disturbing and alarming. He has been banned for life from the NBA, and Silver also said that he will urge the Board of Governors to force a sale of the team and will do everything in his power to ensure that that happens. The owners have the authority, subject to a three-quarter vote, to remove him as owner, according to Silver. These are all comments made by Adam Silver. There's been a ton of public reaction. Players have been tweeting. There was a huge press conference at LA City Hall, and as we bring in the one and only Kyle Neubeck and Zach Oliver. Guys, huge day for the NBA. What are your immediate reactions to the sanctions handed out earlier today? Kyle?
Good riddance. This guy should have been gone from the. And I don't want to look back with hindsight because it's easy to say what they should have done now. But I was a kid when all the allegations came out with Elgin Baylor and all that. So now that I kind of have some semblance of a voice within the basketball community, I have felt the need to speak up and say this guy needs to go. And I think Adam Silver, there were rumors that it was only going to be a fine and maybe a year-long ban before the press conference. And then he came out and just laid the hammer down and made it pretty clear that intolerance is not going to be accepted by the league, which I think no matter what ethnicity, religion, or background you come from, you can stand behind that they're going to treat everyone with respect. So I applaud the NBA today for what they did.
Yeah, I agree with what Kyle had to say. It was basically what they had to do because there was no way that they were going to be able to get the vote done and everything and have him removed as owner, within, 48 hours?
Yeah.
So I think that Silver hit it right on the head with the lifetime ban, and I mean, everybody was freaking out about the potential ban that TMZ was reporting, and then NBC News confirmed.
Yeah, that was a little confusing. I thought that was, once we got the confirmation from NBC, I thought that was it. Now there's actual news outlets reporting it.
Yeah.
But as always, Woj is the one who provided the truth hammer for everyone.
Right, and then also the fact that people, I guess, obviously didn't read Munson's article yesterday that was on ESPN. They had a lot of really good information from the NBA Constitution and bylaws.
That was a really good piece that he did.
Yeah.
Which said that the maximum fine he can issue is $2.5 million.
So you got it completely right.
Right, but the reports were saying it was going to be $5 million. So what are they just kind of pulling numbers out of midair and reporting whatever they can to get clicks?
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, when it's a topic of this magnitude, obviously it went further than just basketball. You saw, watching the press conference, the amount of people that were there to ask questions.
Yeah.
That's and all the people who are in the media said that's the most people they've seen at a press conference in decades, probably.
Yeah, that was kind of ridiculous. There was literally everyone, their brother, their sister, their grandmother, everybody was there.
Kenny
It's a big moment, man.
He made it. Yeah, but the thing that really surprised me was that coming into the press conference with all these reports that it was going to be an indefinite suspension or a big fine, and I thought that was going to be it because everything that we've really been reading has been that it's going to be very hard to force him to sell the team. It's never really happened before where someone has been forced to sell the team, and for Silver to come out after only 3 days with this very, the ultimate penalty pretty much, was I thought it was a little surprising that they were gonna, that they made him sell, and this is what's gonna happen so quickly. given that there wasn't really a precedent for this going into the conference.
And especially in the wake of Mark Cuban's comments, like he's normally one of those guys that's always very critical of either the NBA itself or other leagues. Like he's taken shots at the NFL for some of their hypocrisies recently.
Yeah.
But when he made that comment that it was a slippery slope as far as removing an owner, and he's generally thought of as one of the more progressive guys in the league, that worried me a little bit. Even though there were statements from Michael Jordan and other owners around the league saying that there was no place for this. So I think after hearing some of the things that have been said, it was very reassuring to know that there is in fact no place in the league for Donald Sterling.
And I think even looking at it from a financial perspective, and that was one of the big things I think about why, besides the racism comments, which are bad enough, but the owners are coming out so forcefully against this, specifically this time, because keep in mind Sterling has had drama for decades now pretty much, and no one has really cared up to this point, but he has been, this instance where we've seen CarMax, State Farm, Mercedes, that random casino in the middle of nowhere, California, that sponsors all the Clipper stuff. Everyone is dropping them, and Silver even mentioned it today that it's damaging the league as a whole, and that's why I think you get such a forceful reaction from all the owners, and when you hit them in their wallets, they're going to respond forcefully, and that's why I think they're really actually going to try and force him out, because they know that the economic harm that he's going to be doing is, going to hurt them as well. And I think they're easily going to get the votes to potentially kick him out.
So if Magic Johnson buys the team, how much do you think this is going to hurt Sterling? That, like, insults that he hurled involving Magic.
Well, Magic said
could come back full circle. Well, he said that, but I think he doesn't want to be. That's a case where it could be considered tampering because Sterling still owns the team, and you didn't want to make a comment.
I mean, I think we're a long way.
I think he's very much involved. That Woj actually tweeted out earlier that Magic and his partners are actively going to pursue that team.
I mean, he's got the Dodger shares. It'd be interesting. I don't really think there's a precedent for this. Who knows? There's definitely a lot of interest from people trying to be involved in the NBA, trying to buy teams. I mean, the sale of Milwaukee, there were a bunch of people jockeying for that team, and the NBA is such a hot product right now, and with the TV rights coming up, because keep in mind, they're all going to be renegotiated, I think next year, it might be the year after, but they're going to go way up.
It's coming within the next couple. I can't remember when.
And the value.
The TV deal's up in 2016.
Yeah, and the value of a team now. I mean, this is the worst time if you're Sterling to sell your team, because you could just wait till the next TV deal, and that's why I think he might draw it out if he's really about the money. Where if you just wait a couple years until they get the billions upon billions that they're going to get from ESPN and TNT and everything, then you're going to sell your team for even more than you would get now.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the players' union reaction? Because they seemed like they were it seemed like they were involved in the process from what Kevin Johnson and Roger Mason and Kareem said and even Steve Nash. He was a little briefer than the other guys, but they seemed like they were involved in the whole process, that they were in touch with Adam Silver and the board of governors and all that. So I thought that was very impressive because David Stern always gave that impression, and there were rumors that he ruled as kind of a dictator. And it looks like Silver has been a little more pragmatic about this whole thing and in general. So, Zach, what did you think of all that?
I mean, it doesn't surprise me that the players' union had an impact in the discussions and everything. I mean, you could really tell how big of an issue it was for them, and I mean, of course, it was that big of an issue for everybody, but it seemed like they really were ready to help attack it even more so. And
yeah, I think the difference is it's one thing to be we were all outraged about what was said, but I'm not the subject of the scorn that's coming from Donald Sterling, and they are, and they have to Chris Paul and Blake Griffin have to live under and be employed by that man, and to be accosted like that is like I can't even imagine what they've gone through over the past few days. So there is like an added element there for sure.
Now, what kind of impact is this going to have on tonight's game?
No, I mean, they got to come out fired up, right?
I'd have to think, because I think it definitely had an effect on the last game where they pretty much got blown out. I mean, Steph Curry going off certainly was a bigger factor, but I think tonight they'll definitely have that emotional edge back. They'll be playing at Staples, and they'll definitely kind of have the momentum where they're not going to be dragged down by this ridiculous scandal. And Barkley said it well on TNT a couple days ago, where if you're a player and your world is turned upside down for no reason for something that you had no involvement in, it hurts. And the Clippers definitely had a tough time adjusting to that, but I think now you kind of get the benefits of coming out on top in this situation, and I think they're going to come out, guns blazing.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what the fan reaction is going to be, because I know there have been people who have requested for to be able to
Boycotts.
protest, to boycott and protest outside the arena. And I mean, you've heard players and people from around the league say, "Look, they should do that." So, who knows what they're going to do? But
well, I saw that the Clippers or maybe it might not be the Clippers, but fans have been encouraged to wear black shorts tonight as a sign of solidarity, along with the players wearing black socks like they have. I think Woj tweeted that out. So that would be a cool gesture to see the fans kind of echoing what the Heat did in standing with the Clippers players who have been put through this over the last few days.
And the Clipper fans have got to be overjoyed. This is kind of your ding dong, the witch is dead type situation where for 29 out of 32 years, Sterling's owned the team and they've been awful and just, he's driven them into the ground pretty much. And now in 1 year, you have the best year you've ever had. You're in contention for a title, and you get rid of Sterling at the same time. So it's hard to kind of see how this could have gone any better for Clippers fans, provided that he does actually end up not owning the team anymore after all the lawsuits were done and after all that is filed away.
Well, this just kind of came to me. We were talking about the potential of him waiting to sell the team until the TV deal. I mean, I think Woj tweeted this, that the sale for that team is going to be upwards of $1 billion.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even though the guy's a billionaire and he's 80, somewhere between 80 and 82.
80, I think he's 81.
Yeah, I mean, no one really knows when he was born, apparently, which baffles me. But, I mean, is a guy really going to turn down that much money even if he's that old?
I don't really think it's about the money. I think it's about him being in a club, and, being an NBA owner is, you're in a very exclusive group, and you get kind of the notoriety, and you get known in a way that most people, are not, even if you're a billionaire. Think about the guy who owns the Sacramento Kings, Vivek Randavi, I think his last name is, but he came
I don't even want to try to pronounce his name.
But he came to Sloan this year, and we kind of were able to corral him in the hallway and had a really cool conversation with him, and he wanted to buy Sacramento, and from the stuff that he told me, he wanted to buy the Kings because he loved basketball, and he wanted, why wouldn't you try and run a team, if you really loved the game that much? But it's also kind of a business expense as well, and for these guys that, have been winning their whole lives, and their whole lives have been about, kind of making money, an NBA team is a great investment, and even though sometimes we don't like to see it that way, it is a business, and for these guys, owning a team gives you kind of that power and that notoriety that you wouldn't have got even if you were just a billionaire tech, magnate or whatever.
I think the suspension, the immediate suspension is really important because the status that comes with like sitting courtside at a game, especially when you own the team, is really significant. I mean, you think of like Spike Lee with the Knicks or Jack Nicholson.
I wish he owned the Knicks, but no, you're right. Like look at Mark.
But you think about it, like they're famous by their own accord, but they get a lot more face time than a lot of other celebrities because they're at that game every night.
Think about Cuban or any of these guys. I mean, you could be a billionaire and no one will know who you are, but if you own an NBA team, you know. I mean, Vivek is courtside all the time for Sacramento. And these guys, you get a power trip from being there, knowing that I run this. Like hypothetically, I'm the guy who built all of this, and everyone knows who I am. You can't play on the team, you might as well buy one. And from that mentality, owning an NBA team, is a really valuable piece of investing and something that is a great buy.
Well, one more thing I want to bring up. I know Adam, who writes for the site, brought up the notion of them being sold and moving to Seattle. That is never happening.
That would be. Could you imagine?
That's team out of the Los Angeles market. That market is too valuable.
That, and I tweeted this earlier, like right after the NBPA finished their press conference. The Clippers just signed a 10-year lease with Staples Center recently. So unless there's language in there, yeah, exactly, and that's not going to happen.
I mean, this is comically premature, guys. I mean, Sterling is still probably going to go to court, and I just read a tweet that he told Fox News that the Clippers are not for sale even after Silver's comments. So there's going to be a long road from here. I imagine they'll go to court. From everything you read about the guy, he's probably not one to just give up the Clippers voluntarily. And that's going to be a whole interesting sideshow going forward through next year if they're going to be for sale and there's going to be all this court drama. And I find it hard-pressed that even if the Board of Governors get the 3/4 vote, that there's not going to be some type of court action about this. Right, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, that's who Sterling is. Luckily, I think the way that the league constitution is written, it's going to be tough to find a judge that is going to take that case if it goes through the owner's vote and they unilaterally vote him out. So, I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle, but this guy fought over, like, being a bigot and not letting people of other races rent his apartments. So if you don't think he's going to fight, like he fought the U.S. Department of Justice, he's going to fight the NBA. Like that's who he is.
But no one really knows if he can or not. I mean, there's the 3/4 vote, and pieces of the bylaws have been kind of leaking out over the last couple of days. But we don't really know at this point, because it's never happened before. There's no precedent whether he can supersede the bylaws and take them to court, even if the owners rule that he has to sell the team, which I'm pretty sure is what will end up happening.
Yeah, I think Silver was so strong in his statement that it seemed like he doesn't even care. Like it was more important to him to, number one, stand up for what was right, and number two, get this off the docket.
Yeah, let people focus on the
wheels in motion. And then now everyone can get back to talking about a really good first round of playoffs. That should be the story, but it's good that we had this moment so we can finally get rid of this guy who has been like a leech on the league for a long time.
And, you mentioned the 3/4 vote. I mean, is there going to be an owner that votes no? Because if that information gets out, you know how bad that makes your organization.
They're done. Yeah, you're screwed. You're marked for death, essentially. And rightfully so.
Very bad. And I think even sponsors, there'd be pressure on them to bail if you're an owner who voted to keep Sterling. And I think this is it's very important because the player pressure, the public pressure is so big on this that the NBA has no choice but to listen to them. And I think the owners do take that into account because ultimately the fans and sponsors are the ones that are going to be giving them the money, and they're what allows the league to function. And when the pressure on this got as big as it got, they have no option but to pay attention. And I think there's going to be big public pressure on the other owners to vote him out, even if it may be a slippery slope, as Mark Cuban said.
Yeah, well, I think, and one last thing that I'm thinking of, because I just saw his avatar pop up, Bomani Jones yesterday,
He was great the other day. That was unbelievable.
It came out, like, it's been making the rounds on Twitter today, but
Yeah.
he raised the issue of how we didn't challenge the system 10 years ago, 8 years ago, when he was being sued by a black former general manager, and when he was in court with the U.S. Department of Justice and settled for the largest amount in the history of the housing department.
Yeah.
And like nobody questioned it then because it was going through that legal process, and there wasn't this visceral, like, the audio to accompany that.
Yeah.
But like we have to be able to identify these things and weed these people out before it gets to this point.
I mean,
I think we have to be more diligent in doing that.
I just think the moral compass of the NBA and even the NFL, because the NFL, I mean, the Cleveland guy was investigated by the FBI.
Oh, yeah.
Indiana, Irsay is running around with, every drug under the sun in his system. And, like, they really don't care until it damages them. I mean, think about the NBA. Dolan, what was it? It might have been even 8-10 years ago by now, had a sexual assault thing where Isaiah Thomas is doing these.
Oh, that whole thing was bad.
And that was awful, and it was just whatever. And that, I think, is a big part of why David Stern, a huge failure on his part, because this problem really was not Silver's problem to deal with. He's been on the job for like 5 months, but and he's had a 20-year relationship with the guy, but Stern is the guy in charge. And when you perpetuate this kind of stuff, and you let these billionaires come in with all this, they could be doing shady stuff. They could
like external baggage that the league doesn't need.
I mean, think about the external baggage that some of these guys have, and the way that they run their organizations is just awful. I mean, the Dolan thing was absolutely awful. That was probably the low point in the history of the franchise, and nothing happened other than Stern stepped in, and they ended up getting Mike D'Antoni and firing Isaiah, pretty much. But these guys, like, Sterling's not an isolated incident. This is not the first time this ever happened. The only reason this is such a big deal because it affects the image of the league, where Sterling and his whole Department of Justice thing, which was probably worse than this, way worse than this.
Oh, way worse than this. I mean, and Bomani Jones makes that point with a lot more eloquence than I ever could.
Yeah.
So, do you guys have any final thoughts on the whole thing?
I mean, I'm glad that the NBA acted as fast as they did, and I think that it's going to be an uphill battle for both parties from here on in, but the NBA's at a good starting point, I think, and I would imagine that this vote to kick him out as an owner will most likely take place within the next month, if not the next couple of weeks.
I bet they'll wait till after the finals.
I mean, they could vote and then wait till announce until after the finals also.
True. Good point. That's a good point.
Because Silver said that they wanted to act quickly on this. So, that's something that'll probably come out of it, but I don't know. I think it's going to be a mess because Sterling's going to fight tooth and nail to keep his team, and whoever buys the team is going to really make a big impact. And I think that something that is potentially being overlooked is, or partially at this point I should say, is the fact that they're quite possibly going to lose Doc Rivers because of this, and the impact that this has on free agents wanting to come. I mean, I've seen some people mention
him leaving would necessarily kind of save the franchise in terms of Doc would probably not leave if they had the new owner, and free agents would want to come if they had a new owner.
But
in theory.
Yeah, that's in theory, and that's also assuming that they can get a new owner quickly.
Sure.
But knowing Sterling and his previous precedents that he set, that's not going to happen. This is going to be a thing that goes on for at least another year, probably.
Well, I'm just hoping for as quick a resolution as possible. I'm glad that it happened, and I'm glad to finally just have the focus be back on basketball. And I hope, though I'm not that hopeful that it'll happen, I hope that Sterling will just shut his mouth and
just give it up.
Ruin, I hope he at least lets the focus come back to the playoffs. But this kind of guy, I would imagine, is so egocentric that he will interject himself back into the conversation again, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happened within the next few hours before these games get going.
Right, and it's really a shame that we haven't been able to talk about the basketball that we've seen. The Clippers-Warriors series, there's been a ton of really fun and good basketball played, despite the fact that, the last couple of games haven't been that close. We had the 40-point blowout in Game 2, and then I think the Clippers handled Game 3 pretty easily, and then Game 4, obviously there was the impact of all of this happening on the Clippers, but the Warriors controlled that game from the tip.
Yeah.
Memphis and Oklahoma City's been fantastic. The games have been low scoring and ugly in some people's eyes, but those two teams are fighting tooth and nail, and it's physical, good basketball. Despite Portland's 3-1 lead, that series has been phenomenal.
Yeah, when three out of 4 games go to overtime, it's hard to say that either team is really leading the series because they've been neck and neck the whole time. And Dwight Howard has pretty much dispelled all notions that he is not an elite player or after the injury, because he is putting up monster numbers in the playoffs.
Those 2 blocks he had late in the game the other night were absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and Lakers Dwight has been long gone. He doesn't exist anymore.
This is 2010, 2011 Dwight when he got robbed of the MVP.
All right, well, you're a Magic homer, so I don't want to hear your...
Yeah. Way to call.
Yeah, well, a lot of people will say the same thing, that Derrick Rose shouldn't have won that MVP. So.
All right, well.
Let's say, speaking of Dwight Howard, Tom Haberstroh of ESPN just tweeted out that Howard said, "I just think that racism, hate, and all that stuff, I feel like it shouldn't take an incident for people to stand together." And I think that's probably a good note to leave on, because that echoes a lot of what all of us felt. So let's leave it at that. Thank you, Dwight, for that. Those words of wisdom.
Be interesting to see where we go from here, guys, for sure. Lot to talk about. We'll be coming back with you another hangout if I survive. Finals week next week, guys. Thanks for coming on this week. Very fun. Nice little break. Big day for the NBA. That's all we got for now, right?
FU Sterling. That's all I got.
FU Finals and Sterling. But yeah, pretty much.
All right. See you guys.
Cool. Later.